Okay, so thank you everyone for being here today. I'm very excited. So welcome to another episode of our Global Employability Expert Series. So let's review a little bit about how we're going to have this session. So let's see. So we are going to record this session. You can see it's being recorded, and then you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't seen our previous episode. Maybe we can go to the next slide, and then we can you can ask questions. So here below you have the Q&A section. So that's where you're going to write all your questions. We have the chat, but we're not going to take any questions from the chat. We're going to use the Q&A section. Okay, so please, any questions you have for our speaker, you can type them there, and we're going to address them by the end of the presentation. We're going to allocate some time to answer all your questions. Okay, so let's see what interesting webinar we're having today. So today we have a really interesting topic, which is working for the European Union in Brussels and beyond, career insights from a young professional. So let's explore who this young professional is, who our speaker today is. So for today we have Maria Jarvo. Let's see who Maria is, a little bit about Maria. So Maria works as a program manager at the European Union Directorate General for International Partnerships in Brussels. Her professional experience spans across the civil society, private and public sectors, and has mainly focused on international cooperation and sustainable development. She has graduated in international business, sustainable development, and international relations in Australia, Sweden, Argentina, and Italy. So in this webinar, she will share her thoughts about career development within the international cooperation sector. And she will also share her reflections, insights, and tips on how to best succeed as a young professional. So I'm very excited to have you here today, Maria. Thank you for being here and welcome.
Thank you so much, Mirta. First of all, I would like to thank you all for being here and taking the time to listen to me. I hope that my journey may bring you some insights, whether or not you're interested in working with international relations and cooperation specifically. So, as you know from the slide and from Mirta's presentation, my name is Maria, and I work as a program manager at the European Commission's Directorate General for International Partnerships. For those of you that don't know, Directorate Generals, or DGs, as we call them for short, are the equivalent of national ministries, but at the supranational EU level. So you could say that I'm working for the EU Ministry for International Development and Cooperation, which is what it was called until the beginning of this year. And today I wanted to tell you a little bit about my professional journey and how I ended up at the EU. And I've baked in some tips along the way that I thought might be useful. And at the end of the presentation, I'll also share some specific info about on working with the EU and in international cooperation as well in general. So my professional journey begins in Australia, which is where I immigrated with my family when I was 13. During my undergraduate degree there in international business, I participated in 2 exchange programs, first to Spain and then to Sweden, which is where I'm originally from, as I wanted to get back to my roots. But this move and this part of my professional journey brings me to my first tip to you. This is a photo from my exchange in Spain, which is to find and take all the opportunities available, whether they be exchanges, voluntary extracurricular activities, student associations. In short, try to be proactive, whether it is in your studies or in your professional life. I think for me, this exchange changed everything, since it made sure that I well and truly got out of my comfort zone. I remember how much my head used to hurt from trying to process all the Spanish. but this experience really empowered me to believe that I could take on anything. And so really, I feel kickstarted everything and gave me the courage to do everything that I did after this. But I think that all of you are already on a good path since you're here doing this internship. And I think that's a good example of taking the opportunities that are available out there. But back to my journey, back to 2009, which is when I graduated from university. And at this stage, I'm in a bit of a crisis because I've realized that international business isn't what I wanted to do after all. And that what I really wanted to do was to work with sustainable development and save the world from climate change. Luckily, I had the opportunity at the time to continue my studies in Sweden, and which is where I went and studied exactly this, sustainable development. And this leads me to my second tip to you, which is don't be afraid to change your mind. If you're lucky enough to have the possibilities. I think our careers often become intertwined. I think especially now, our generation, coming generations, that careers become intertwined with our identity, and that this can sometimes make us feel locked into our choices. But it doesn't have to be, we don't have to be locked. I think that no experience is ever wasted. And even if you decide to change the focus of your career and work with something other than you studied, you will be coming at this new topic or sector with a different perspective. And I think that you can make this your advantage. And this was the case for me. I was one of my first jobs after my studies in sustainable development was working with corporate social responsibility consulting, where I helped companies and the private sector to take more responsibility for their impact, for the impact that their businesses have on the environment and communities. And I learned a lot in this job, but I still felt that there was something missing. And I think I wanted more diversity. I was in Stockholm at the time, but I wanted to have colleagues from all over the world. Essentially, I wanted to expand my geographic horizons. So I Googled and I found a master program, which was taught in Spanish and in Italian, and it was studied in Argentina and Italy, focusing on international relations between Latin America and Europe. And since I'd studied Spanish already in my undergraduate degree, this was the perfect opportunity for me to improve my Spanish skills and also learn Italian. And this is my third tip to you. And it's nothing new. I think you all know that languages are important, but I just wanted to emphasize this. Languages open doors, not only professional, but also personal. I met my husband in the master program, but languages have helped me find like-minded friends from all over the world, friendships that weren't possible before. And another tip is with languages, I think that the best way to learn them is to try to immerse yourself as much as possible and try not to be a perfectionist. I think it's hard to become an expert on a second language, but I think the only way to improve is to talk, and that's how you learn the fastest. So I think immersion and don't be scared even if you don't speak it perfectly. Once I'd graduated, so back to the story of my career, once I'd graduated, I was eager to begin working with international relations, and I moved back to Australia for work from Italy and Argentina. But it was much more difficult than I had imagined. I struggled because I realized that my options to work in this field, in international cooperation, and focusing on Latin America was very limited where I was, which was in Australia. So, but eventually I did succeed in getting a job at the Australian Department for Agriculture. But I think I was still set on really putting my master's degree to use and working with relations between Europe and Latin America. This led me to take a chance and apply for the Blue Book traineeship with the European Commission in Brussels. And I was invited to work with the management of their regional climate change program in Latin America. And while the Blue Book traineeship, which I'll talk a little bit more about after this, is paid, there aren't any guarantees for future employment, although there are prospects, but there aren't no guarantees. And it was scary to leave a stable job for a traineeship, but I took the risk and I left my safety in Canberra for this new adventure in Brussels, which brings me to my fourth tip, which is I listened to my gut, and luckily for me, it worked out. It didn't end up. A lot of my fellow trainees at the Blue Book in my intake did end up staying on, which is what I did as well. So I stayed on, covering a short-term contract in my unit until I was selected for a junior professional in delegation program, which is another similar Blue Book type program, but in EU delegations. And EU delegations are essentially European Union's embassies all around the world. So there are EU delegations in most countries around the world. And so these are called delegations. And I was specifically sent to Colombia, where I continued to work on the management of climate change programs, but also on human rights projects. Last year, I returned to Brussels, and I'm back in my old unit, which is this regional climate change program for Latin America. And this time I'm working on a 6-year-long contract in Brussels at HQ. To become a permanent staff member at the EU, you've got to pass a public competition. And I'm studying to hopefully pass one of these one day. But my final tip for you to finish up my career story is another one, which I don't think is any news to you. I'm sure that you've been told this millions of times, but to build your network. It's worth emphasizing, and I think above all, be kind and not competitive with your colleagues and your fellow interns. You never know when you might need their help. This is a photo of my internship at the Council of Europe, which is in Strasbourg, and not the same as the European Union and the Council of the European Union, even though they share a similar flag and have a similar logo. But many of these fellow interns are my friends, and they've been extremely valuable to me. I think I've learned as much from them as I have at the internship itself. So I think your network and your fellow interns are a huge asset to you. So that's it, I think, for my story about my career. I will now pass on to some tips about working for the European Union. So I spoke about the Blue Book traineeship. This is a paid traineeship that has intakes twice a year. There's an intake, the March intake is open right now, open until the end of this month. The traineeships are based in the EU, mostly in Brussels and in Luxembourg as well. And you don't have to be an EU national to apply. I met Mirta in this traineeship, and she came from Argentina, so there's no need to be a European citizen. And there are many different DGs to choose from, so Directorate Generals. You can, as I said, the European Union is like a government with many different ministries, and so you can work with IT or human resources or mobility or research. It doesn't necessarily have to be international cooperation.
Yeah, actually, Maria, I'm going to jump in just to share a little bit about what I did. As Maria said, we met each other at our traineeship in Brussels. Well, actually, do you remember how we met, Maria? That's a nice story.
At the student
election day.
Elections, that's right.
We were going to meet the candidates for, so the traineeship had a committed of trainees. And so each session, we choose a president, vice president, and different commissions. So I met you at a bar, yes, where the different candidates were introducing themselves. And it was funny because I remember you met me and said, oh, where are you from? And I said, Argentina. And in a perfect Argentinian Spanish, you said, hola, soy Maria. And I was like, what? So yeah, it was really nice. So I did my traineeship in the Executive Agency for Education, Audiovisual and Culture. So yeah, there are many, as Maria said, these are like ministries for the country. So there are dozens of ministries, right, with different topics.
Exactly. And well, programs, and I think that there are lots of international elements as well in all of these, like where you worked. So education programs, for example, Erasmus.
Exactly. I worked with the Erasmus Plus program, which is like the extension. Erasmus was originally for mobility in Europe, but Erasmus Plus now means they finance different kind of projects in the whole world, not only in the European Union, because that's something that many people don't know, right? That we think, oh, European Union only works for Europe, when they actually work all over the place, right?
Exactly. I think that's another good tip. So in terms of studies, there are a lot of Erasmus Plus master programs as well that you can apply for, and where you can kind of traveling master programs where you do different semesters at different universities in Europe. And I also understand that there are some scholarships, I think, or reduced. I don't have all the details, so I don't want to say too much, but there are definitely opportunities in the Erasmus Plus program. And there are also other internships. So apart from the Blue Book traineeship, there are also other EU institutions like the Parliament. There's the Schuman traineeship, which is the Parliament, and then there's also the Council of the European Union, which is so one of the three main institutions, which is the Parliament, the Commission, and the Council. So the Council also has traineeships, as well as other entities like the Committee of Regions. So it's a whole jungle, I guess. It's maybe hard to navigate, but once you do your research, you'll find that there are lots of different opportunities within the EU system. And another one of these which is what I mentioned before, which is what I did in Colombia, was to work for the EU delegation. And EU delegations also take interns. Not all of them are paid. And then there's also the Junior Professional Program, which I took a part of, and they have biannual intakes. But those applications go through the EU member states. So I think that one's only open for EU citizens. But as we said, there's something for everyone at the EU. And so there's also public competitions like the ones that I mentioned for permanent positions, and they are advertised on the EPSO website. There is a link in the slide, so when it's sent to you, you can access it through there. And now, finally, some tips for working in this sector. I think the most important thing if you want to work in international cooperation or international development is to get on-the-ground experience. This is extremely valuable and often a requirement if you want to work. And there are lots and lots, especially NGOs, that offer these kind of internships mostly, and they don't, depending on the area and the geographic and thematic, which is the second point. There's a lot of different experiences you can choose from, and I would suggest that if you're interested in working in this sector, to try to think about what thematic area or geographic interests you. You don't have to, like I said, you don't have to stay with the same geographic part of the world for the rest of your life, but I think it's a good start when you're looking for internships and starting your career, and then you can easily move to other parts, thematic or geographic. And finally, I would also say that internships are necessary. And personally, I've done about 4 internships. So it's a lot. And unfortunately, a lot of these internships are unpaid. And some of them also require investment in terms of living costs. So it's unfortunate because I think that it means that it's not as open to this sector is its nature. So to be competitive means that you often have to do these at least maybe 1 or 2 unpaid internship to get that experience. But here I would and I hope that it will change, and that UN and other organizations, especially the big ones, will start paying their interns. But I would say that there you should try to do internships that are that have some kind of direct link to your to the sector that you're interested in, and maybe try to find out before if there is a prospect to be hired afterwards. And I think that's like the Blue Book, for example. I know that, as I said, they don't make any promises, but it's known that there are these possibilities to stay on after you finish your traineeship. I would also encourage you that when you're doing your traineeships to try to ask for tasks that you can do from start to finish. So although it's important and good to learn about the processes and the way that organizations work on a day-to-day basis, but also to try to look for those things that you can include in your CV that you can say, I was there when we started, or and finished this product, or this one thing, or this project, or this event, or whatever it may be. And finally, also I would say a final tip would be also to stand up for yourself if you feel that you're not getting enough interesting work. It's always good to remind your supervisor or whoever your mentor is at the organization where you're doing your internship, to explain that you're there to learn. And so again, trying to be proactive. I think sometimes interns can be forgotten. So I think it's good to not stay quiet, because often your internship is short. It's maybe between 3 and 5 months. So it's good to make them aware of the fact that you want to learn as much as possible. But that's probably not news to you either. I'm sure you've all thought about this. And I think with that, I don't have anything more to say in my presentation. So I'm done. I don't know.
Well, thank you, Maria. Well, it was really interesting because, well, as Maria shared, she has a lot of experience with internships, right? This is something we know that finding a job requires experience. How are we going to have experience if we have never worked? So this is when internships come in. And one thing that I want to stress is, well, for me, in my own experience with my traineeship, one thing I really take away from that experience is the people I met, right? Like Maria, honestly, like for me, like connecting with people is super important. And Maria, I liked something that you really said. I think it was your second tip, like when you were sharing that at a certain moment you had a crisis because you didn't feel that what you had studied made sense for you, or that it was something that you wanted, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I think that's a really good insight to have, which is super normal to have a crisis while we're creating our career path. As we all know, career development is a continuum, is a process, right? It's not linear. It's not something that we're going to say, oh, from A to B, and it's going probably to look like more really complex. So as Maria said, I think like it's okay to change ideas, right? Just in your mind, said, okay, let me try this, let me explore that one. And so we have a really interesting question from the audience who said, okay, during your whole journey and everything you did, Was it scary for you? And how do you deal with the unknown?
I think if you look at it, it feels different, because when I was, now that I've explained it like this, it seems like one long period that makes sense. But I guess that in the end, when you, I think your career and the way it feels, it's like every little step you take it at the time. So some parts, definitely. I mean, like I said, leaving like a permanent job to take an internship, that was definitely scary. And I didn't have my safety net was that I could always buy a ticket back to Australia and go back if it didn't work out. So of course, I think yeah, some parts have been scary, but I think at the same time, every time it went well, every time I succeeded, I was also more empowered. And I don't know if it's like the adrenaline that you get when you jump off a plane or whatever, but I think it definitely motivates you to keep challenging yourself, and that it's not so scary maybe to that I think that in the end I thought it would have been worse not to have tried, to have studied what I wanted to study. In the end, I've found what I would like to do, but then in the end I wasn't able to take that final step. So I would say yes. I think if you're not scared, then I think that was a quote from a previous presentation. If you're not scared, you're not growing. So I think being scared is a little bit scared is good.
Yeah, there's one phrase that says, like, if your dreams or your goals don't scare you, then they're not the right one, right? We always have this scary factor in anything big we want to achieve, right? Because, well, we're not there yet. We don't know what it's going to take, how the road is going to look like. So of course it may be scary, right? But we should never let the fear stop us. And well, actually, people who study fear, they say that it is very unlikely that we may not have fear at all. That what we need to know to do is learn how to handle fear and do things even if we have that scary feeling, right? So definitely having this feeling and doing it anyway, that's as you said, also very empowering, right? Like saying, oh, I feel really scared, but I'm going to do it anyway. So we have another question. Yes.
No, I was just going to say, I think that maybe a tip for your career, but also general in life, is that focus on your resilience. So if you try to control the external factors, which is almost impossible because you never know how things are going to turn out. So I try to focus your energies on your ability to deal with these possible scenarios, rather than determining how these scenarios will turn out, especially if you can't influence them where you are in life at that moment. So try to prepare yourself and say, okay, if I get to that point where I finished my traineeship but there is no jobs, then I will be strong enough to deal with that situation, and I'm taking that risk and I'm accepting it. So
definitely. And I really like what you're saying, because sometimes it's like in our mind, we say, oh, I don't want any problems, right? And if we have to wish for, if we had like this magic, the genius from Aladdin, and he said, okay, ask 3 wishes. And one may think like, oh, my wish is not to have any problems, right? Anymore. And one say like, no, that's not realistic. Maybe what we can really work on is saying, whenever a hard situation, a difficult situation arises, I'm going to be able to sort it out, right? Like I trust in my ability to handle a difficult situation. And that is why it is super important to work on ourselves in terms of developing the skills we need. Resilience is super important. We also know nowadays that emotional intelligence is also very important, right? How we deal with our emotions and what we do with that. And here we have an interesting question. Someone is asking, okay, so what was the thing that really kept you motivated when you faced some really difficult task or difficult moment?
I guess it was this goal, the realization that I knew, I kind of knew at that stage what I wanted to work with, or I didn't know exactly what I would be doing, right? And I think that's a difficult thing, because when I went to uni, I was in Queensland. You go to uni when in Australia when you're 17, so you don't really know exactly what kind of jobs are even out there, and so when you choose your degree, you I think I chose international business because it had the word international in it. So I mean, I don't know, I was really unaware of not strategic at all, and I don't think I knew what I wanted. But I think once I did know that I wanted to work internationally, I think that's and that I wanted to work with sustainable development somehow, whether it be from, and I tried from different perspectives, but I really like the international corporation sector. And I think so that knowing that I liked this kind of did motivate me a lot. But I also think now, in hindsight, that it's also good to think about other things, like the topic, so the sector that you want to work in, but also whether you want to work with, do you want to work in a big city or in a small city, or what kind of opportunities maybe that the sector that you want to work in, what kind of what is the nature of the jobs that you can get, which is something that I don't think I considered at the beginning, but now I do. I mean, I love the fact that when you work with international corporation, there are opportunities to learn about new parts of the world, and you're constantly reading about whatever topic you're working on, and so you can. I mean, it's an international environment, which is, I think, what I sought. But you can find that international environment, and I think that's also important to remember. Just because international corporation has the word international in it, doesn't mean that there isn't an international aspect to almost anything, any sector that you can work in. So I think let's say if you studied medicine, I think you can go and work for Medicines Without Borders, or I mean, just to give you examples of the fact that those can be elements that motivate you, that it doesn't necessarily have to be the topic or the sector itself, but a part or an element of how you can work within that sector.
Yeah, exactly. In my personal case, I discovered that, well, I studied international relations. Well, that's what we have in common, right? That's what we both were pursuing similar path. Well, in Europe, me in South America. Yeah, I studied international relations. I didn't have quite, completely it's super clear idea what I wanted to do. I did know that I liked the international, environment, community. I loved cultures, languages, but I didn't know what exactly was that I liked. And then after a personal and professional journey that took me also to the Caribbean, to the Dominican Republic, and then France. And then I said, well, actually, I love education. I love teaching. I love creating projects related to education. And then I had the opportunity to work at in the Dominican Republic. And then I ended up creating an NGO that worked with education, and also with, we worked with Haiti, which is a country next to the Dominican Republic. And then I suddenly said, oh yeah, I'm also working in an international context. And that's how I did my master's in education and international development. So it all came finally I said, okay, this fits, right? Perhaps I'm not working specifically like in the hardcore of international relations, like politics and what I had pictured for myself, because at 20 years old, I thought that that's what I wanted. And then I said, actually, I like it something more soft. I like education, I like being with people, connecting. And so that's really interesting, right? To discover and say like, well, maybe there's an international component to what I do, even if it's not technically international relations, right? Or politics. So talking about international relations and the EU, I have a very interesting question here that says, can you tell us about the challenges one should expect when working on an international level organization like the EU?
Well, I think that there's like always two sides to every coin, right? And if diversity is extremely good, but it also means that you need to be able to accept and adapt to people that think and act differently to you in different situations. So I think that is probably something really, and I think we all say, I'm very adaptable, and I can work in diverse environments, but I remember, for example, working in Colombia, even though I spoke Spanish and I had learned Spanish in Argentina, Colombia was really different to Argentina, and so I had to learn to speak Spanish in a completely different way, to not to offend anyone, and you know, and the way that I communicated, no, and with my colleagues, and also with the project. So to always keep that in the back of your mind, I think that to be mindful of others, and remind yourself. I think as soon as we think that we've fully learned or fully adapted, then I think that's when we stop adapting. So I would say that's the biggest not challenge, because it's a challenge, but I think it's a fun challenge if you see it in the way that you'll learn something new. But I think for some it can definitely be a problem, because they see it that way, and of course when there is a miscommunication or whatever, which often can happen if you speak different languages and you think in different ways, depends on how you resolve this. But so I would say this, and then maybe another thing in international organizations, so maybe the EU, also the United Nations, but also maybe any public sector organization, is that there is a lot of bureaucracy, especially these democratic institutions, and so it's important to remember that the nature, if you like a really fast-paced environment, then maybe working being depending on EU legislation is not for you, because some things take time, but that's how it's meant to be, because democracy it has to be transparent, so it takes a long time to get these laws and regulations through, and then we implement those budgets, and so you're kind of a small part in a very, very big cog. So I think that you probably just need a bit of patience, I guess, as well, to work in those type of organizations.
Yes, I think that's a really, really interesting advice. Being patient in organizations that are really big, like you said, and are quite bureaucrat, then one must have patience, right?
Yeah.
And we have another question here. It's like, what is for you the value of self-learning, and how have you done? You mentioned that you learned many languages, and it seems you're very curious. How important it is for you to be self-learning, and how do you do it?
I'm lucky enough that at the moment, through my job, I have a lot of opportunities to self-learn, or so to say, that there are a lot of different courses. So from personal development, like written communication, how to write better, or how to what the latest news on, or understanding the latest tax regulations that affect countries in Latin America, or so it could be anything from a specific topic related to what I work with, or the way, like the program project part, managing part, or also this personal development. And I think because I have that available through work, I think I use that as much as I can, and I think that's great. I think if you continue, like I said, I think if you think you're finished, and that you don't need to do any more courses or need to question the way you do things or learn new things, then I think you also maybe stop having as much fun with what you do. I think that we need those inputs, those reading about those new ways of thinking or whatever it is you're learning to keep us motivated. So definitely, I think that's important. So now I do it through work, but before I've done lots of university courses, like freestanding courses through university in Sweden, like rhetorics, for example, which was a really, really useful course. So that's mostly what I've done personally. But I know that now that there are even more things there's so many different education universities online that don't cost anything, or I think
we have,
knows better
well, there
than me.
is Coursera, right, that offers courses that you can pay, but also you can audit for free, and then you can learn so many different subjects and topics, right? And yeah, edX, so many different platforms. And so I have a question. You said, related to what we were discussing before, like, how do you motivate yourself in the halfway, like when things are not going as planned, and and then you feel perhaps that, well, you don't have the drive or that passion, how do you do?
When you're not when you're not there yet, but
yeah,
when
you're in the
getting
middle
there,
and things are taking their time and it feels like, I'm not sure, should I continue, like maybe I should just give up. What is that works for you?
I think try to find someone that is doing what you want to do. I mean, and because I did those internships, the photo that I showed you, and which is what I said, right, that they've helped me a lot in my career development, because without them, I wouldn't have known about the other internship that was the Blue Book one, or they've gone on to work in academia or in the private sector or with financial institutions. Or I think having those interns and friends as people to share ideas with and ask about what it was like for them when they worked in a specific organization or sector or whatever, I think always motivates me. But I'm motivated by conversations and people, so I think that's the best for me, and I've been lucky to have people like that accessible to me. So I think if you don't know anyone that works in the sector or that you would like to work in, then maybe try to reach out. I don't know if you can reach out through LinkedIn, or if you find a profile of someone that is doing exactly what you would love to do, then I'm sure people love compliments. So if you write and say, oh, I think what you're doing sounds so interesting, maybe you can give me a tip about how you got there, I'm sure that most people would reply.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that is super important, to connect with people we already know, but with people that we don't know. But today we have LinkedIn, and we can send a connection request. And then, like you said, we can send a message and say, hey, I'm impressed by what you do. It looks very interesting. Maybe we could have a Zoom, and I can know a little bit more about your journey. And that's something that it's really useful. And that's what we call informational interviews, which is that it's not that you're going to ask for jobs to someone that you don't know, but just to have more information. And actually, we have a really nice another expert series on informational interviews. So I'm going to share with you guys the link so you can subscribe to our channel and find also the link about informational interviews, because that's the opportunity for you to reach out to someone you don't know and said, hey, do you have 15 minutes just to talk and exchange? And then you can ask about the other person's journey, and they can provide some tips that may be useful for our career development. So, okay, Maria, I'm going to ask you the last question. We have so many questions and people are really interested in your journey, but I'm going to ask you the very last question. But before I'm going to share, through the chat, I'm going to share the link to our YouTube channel so you can subscribe. And then I'm going to share also the webpage for the traineeships. I just send them so you can have them. And yes, okay, so before we finish our really interesting talk, one of that, let me find the internship. The internship, sorry, the question.
Question, yeah.
Yeah, we're so talking about internship that I may look for an internship myself. Why not? Let me find it. Okay, so after all this long journey, do you feel satisfied? Did you figure it out?
Well, I would quote Socrates and say, the more I learn, the more I know that I don't know, right? So I feel like I've gotten to where I wanted to be 5 years ago, and I wanted to work in this sector. I'd studied this, and I love doing this, but I would definitely not rule out. I think nothing is forever, and it's good not to stay static. And I think that dreams are important motivators. So I would say that I don't think I'll be here forever. Maybe there's something else that will be interesting. Well, it's an open page. I think at the moment I want to keep moving in the direction that feels right, which is climate change and working on an international in an international workplace, I guess. But I think that you can do that in so many different ways. So I would say for now, yes, but you never know. I think it's good to keep an open mind, and yeah, like I said, we don't know that no, sorry, I was going to say that about the quote that so we know less. The more we know, the less we know that's what we want.
Yeah,
so
I
think
that's I feel you, because when I started my university and I started learning so many things, I realized how ignorant I was about so many things, right? I was like, oh my God, I thought I knew, but now I don't know. You know, there are so many things I could know, and I think that you and I share this very big curiosity. We are always wanting to know and learn more, and therefore explore new topics and fields, right? And so that brings a lot of I believe that it's nice to always consider that it is important to be satisfied with the journey we are building, right? And really enjoying the experience, because, well, we are alive and we can experience, and thanks we have this option to always be learning, right? So I think it's a compromise between saying, I'm doing this and I'm really enjoying it, knowing that, especially nowadays, with such a fast changing world and industries and jobs, right? We don't know what the next super job is going to be in 5 years, in 10 years. When I was at school, like, internet didn't exist, right? You are also from my time. So when I ended high school, like, being a community manager, well, that wasn't an option. Like, internet was like there like for 3 years, and I had a computer in my house, but just a few people. So we don't know
Yeah.
what's going to happen. And that means that we don't know if the career we chose for us, for ourselves today is going to be the one we want to do for the rest of our life. So it's good to have this idea of let's enjoy what we're doing, the path we're building, and then being open to explore new options, change our minds, get into new fields. There are so many interesting things to discover out there, right? So I think that's a really good message.
Exactly. And I think it's good to try to make sure that you're happy where you are. And if you start feeling a bit bored, or you think, that looks really interesting over there, then not to wait for too long before you take the leap, I think, as well, because it's easy also to get, the older we get, I think, the more likely we are also to kind of to take that jump, to change careers, or to, I mean, obviously it's not as easy, but I think it's important to keep that that open mind, and that reducing the risk of starting to hate your job. If you have the opportunities and possibilities to work and to expand and challenge yourself, so then it's good to try to take them in time before you realize after 5 years in the same job that you're like, oh, I haven't enjoyed this for 4 years, So,
Yeah, absolutely.
try to feel how you feel on a regular basis. I think, is this still what I want to do? Is this still what drives me?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Maria. It was a pleasure having you. I'm very happy. And for all people who are here, I'm going to send the link where you can write internship coach at virtualinternships.com. You can write to me, and I will share all the links that we just shared over the chat. And don't worry, you will receive this presentation and also the recording. But if you are very anxious and cannot wait, you can send me an email there, and I will send the link. Okay. So thank you very much all for being here. It was a pleasure having you, and hope to meet you again in a new expert series webinar in 2 weeks. And thank you so much, Maria, for being here today.
Thank you, Mirta, and thank you all for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.